And good morning, Cuse Nation. Welcome to the Upstate Orange podcast on FingerLakes1.tv and YouTube. I'm Jim Sineker, back live inside the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. It's Sunday morning, February 28th, 2016. And we'll be talking about Syracuse's 75-66 win over NC State on Senior Day in the Dome. We'll reevaluate our NCAA resume. And as usual, some great Orange basketball trivia with the professor. The Upstate Orange podcast is brought to you by Generations Bank with locations in Auburn, Farmington, Geneva, Phelps, Seneca Falls, Union Springs, and Waterloo. Be sure to check out their mobile banking app or visit them online at mygenbank.com. So, Brad, welcome back to the show. How you doing this morning?
I'm great, Jim. Happy Sunday morning. We
edge a little closer to March here, and a little later in the show, I just want to gauge our excitement level. As a general theme this year, I love following Syracuse. I just have been struggling to regain that excitement for college basketball that I had. It was really just 4 or 5 years ago still that I carried through my childhood. I don't know if I'm getting older or if the ACC is wearing on me, but it's just not a little less anticipation, I guess. But we'll talk about that a little later. Right now, we got to get right into it. And Syracuse plays NC State in the Dome. Sitting at 18 wins, needing to beat NC State to get to 19 and edge closer to 20, which I think is the magic number for the NCAA tournament for us. And yeah, we win the game. We won the game by 9, but we really need a heroic performance from Gbinije, and NC State just not a good team. And I don't. How do you look at this win for Syracuse?
It was a game they needed to win. I wouldn't say it was a must-win, but it was a game that would go very squarely into the bad loss column if they did lose it. Home game against the legitimate bottom of the ACC, a team that's not even 500 anymore. It was a game that they really, in order to get to that magical 20 win, if they had lost this one, it would have put 20 wins in some kind of jeopardy. So good that they got it in the win column. There's definitely a few good things you can take away from the game, a few questionable things yet again, and unfortunately that's what you get with this team. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I think, in a lot of cases. And we'll talk about both, I guess. But the senior day, and senior day is a bit of it's a day for celebration, I think, as much as anything. And we were certainly afforded that. It's nice that Syracuse is a program that actually has seniors, contributing seniors that we can honor and watch go out with that kind of acclaim rather than the one and done types, which would be nice to have some of those guys if they're that kind of talented. But it's nice having seniors too to watch grow and develop and play through and honor and hold that jersey above their head.
Well, let's talk about the seniors. Gbinije and Cooney and Christian White. I guess we'll probably focus on Gbinije and Cooney, but Gbinije really rising to the occasion on his last day in the Dome, and Cooney 1 for 8 from 3, and just really an awful game. And it's just interesting that here on his senior day, we're still frustrated with Cooney, and the only thing to me that's gonna make me turn on Cooney and remember him is a Orange great. It's the total stats and numbers when you add them all up, all the 3-pointers and points and minutes played and all that, will make you think, Trevor Cooney maybe belongs in the, a top 30 type of all-time Orange player. But unless he does something to carry us through March, I'm going to say, see you later, Trevor, on to the next. I'm not going to really miss him too much. I don't know if I'm being, I don't know if I'm going to kick myself next year when whoever's in his place is. And I definitely won't kick myself next year. I'm done with him. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. He's a 5-year Syracuse guy. We've seen him. It seems like he's been here forever. You tip your cap to the guy. He more than that guy, and that's you have to give him that kind of credit. And the good is great with him, and the bad is just head-scratchingly bad for a fifth-year senior. And unfortunately, that was the guy we saw yesterday. 1 for 8 from the field. Actually didn't make a three.
Oh, yeah, 0 for 6 from 3, 1 for 8 from the field.
And we'll talk a little bit about that later, part of the trivia segment. But it wasn't even the shooting, which we've in some ways come to expect. That I told you earlier in the season, I'm surprised when he makes it, more so than pleased. And it's funny to watch when he gets on a fast break, and he just goes straight for the corner on every fast break. He doesn't attack the basket. He doesn't try and get to the block to get a layup. He just goes straight to the corner, so he can get a kick out for a 3. And the crowd, there's such an anticipation when he launches a 3. You can hear it. You can hear the crowd sort of rumble a little bit. Everybody's thinking. Everybody's hoping. And I'm just sitting back on my couch like, there's no way it's going in.
Yeah.
And maybe if it does, I'm surprised. But it seems like there's still this expectation that he's just this tremendous shooter. The announcers make that claim, and it's everybody. Yeah. Everybody has this reputation. Everybody thinks that he has this reputation of a great shooter. And I guess if you know the team well enough, you know that he's as streaky as they get. And boy, if he's on a bad streak, it's not happening for him. I mean, yesterday he hit the side of the backboard on one. He obviously didn't make any. But it's not only the threes. It's he fouls a 3-point shooter. I mean,
my God!
Senior, he fouls a 3-point shooter. He drives in the lane and he just chucks it out of bounds without even knowing somebody's there. Like, it's just things that freshmen do, things that high school kids do, things that my 6th graders do. Like, he's a 5th-year senior. He's been playing college basketball for 5 years and he still does these things. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, and another stat that I'd point out from yesterday is 0 assists. I mean, here's a guard who's working hard out there. 5th-year senior, not getting anybody else involved. 0 assists, and
you're right. I was surprised yesterday. 0 steals for him. One of the top steal guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he's such an emotional guy. I think when you see him on the floor, and he's there's the internet meme that goes around of the Cooney face, and
right.
he's as emotionally invested in that game as anybody, and you can just see it. And on a senior day, you wonder if it just affects guys differently. You see how it affected Gbinije, man. He had best game he might have had in the 3 years he's been here.
Yeah.
And then you see Cooney, who might have had his worst game in 3 years.
But
and
isn't that
this? Some guys rise to it, and some guys, they wither under it, maybe.
But isn't it the same way, Brad?
Polar opposites of that.
The same way come NCAA tournament. Some guys rise to it, some guys wither. I don't have confidence that Cooney's going to rise to it. I think, he's going to be a detriment. He's going to be. We're going to be sitting here talking about a 1st or 2nd round loss, and we're going to look at the box score, and it's going to be like this: 0 for 6 from 3, or better, or worse in the NCAA tournament. Especially if we dig a deficit, it'll probably be something like 2 for 10. From 3. And
well, you remember the last time this team made the tournament, they lost that 1st round game to Dayton. It was a 6-11 game, I think it was, and they had no business losing to Dayton.
Right.
And it was that kind of. I don't think they scored 50 points in that game, and it was that. I mean, Cooney was a sophomore in that team, and so was Gbinije. But yeah, it was that kind of shooting performance, and nobody rose to the occasion in that game at all. And I think what's unfortunate with Cooney, and sort of in the big picture, we've always, and they even mentioned it in the broadcast yesterday, that fairly or unfairly, he's always been compared to Jerry McNamara. But you think about Jerry McNamara in the context of a guy that absolutely rose to the occasion in big spots.
Right.
You think of the national championship game, and 17 points and 6 threes in the 18 6 threes in the first half.
Big East
tournament. 43 he had against BYU in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
You think of the Big East tournament, shots after shots after shots to basically carry his team to a Big East championship. Could you ever get that from Trevor Cooney, you think?
There was a time when I was waiting and thinking, and that we'll just wait, and he'll mature, and it'll get better, But again, senior day, his last game in the Dome, 0 for 6 from 3, 1 for 8, 0 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 turnovers, 5 points. And you contrast that with another guy who a couple years ago, Gbinije, was not looked upon as. We always knew he was a McDonald's All-American, but we had questions whether he would ever, turn into the type of senior that would be an actual All-American candidate in college, not just a prospect. And, you look at his line, 11 of 18 shooting, 8 for 13 from 3. And this guy wasn't supposed to be a 3-point shooter is like Cooney was. Cooney was supposed to be the best shooter that ever played at Syracuse. Some people were saying, well, he went 0 for 6. Gbinije went 8 for 13, 34 points, 6 assists on top of the 34 points. I mean, there's such a huge disparity between Gbinije and Cooney. And you go back to that sophomore campaign that you were talking about, and at the time they were both kind of much maligned as, but we said they're younger, they'll get better, and now in their senior year, I don't think Cooney has really gotten any better at all, where Gbinije's made huge leaps.
Sophomore year, if someone had given you the lines of today's senior day, or yesterday's senior day game, and said one of the guys is going to go for 34 points and 8 for 13 from 3, 6 assists, and one of the guys is going to go for 5 points and 0 assists and a couple of turnovers. You'd be hard pressed to say it would be Cooney that would go for 5 points and Gbinije for 34. I think at that point, based on the claim that each of them had at that time.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I would have probably guessed it to be Cooney.
Right.
And, one bright side, I think, is that with 32 points or 32 minutes here for Cooney, at least Boeheim might be starting to recognize a little bit that this may never happen, and he can probably see it coming, and at least he didn't have him in there for 39, 40 minutes. He pulled him off a little bit, but which is really odd, especially.
Right. He had him off for a long stretch at the end of the first half. He had done, I think it was when he hit the side of the backboard and then made a dumb pass in the next possession. He pulled him off for 4 or 5 minutes, which I was surprised it was that long. And at that time, he was also, put Roberson down on his list, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, too. But, for a long stretch, he had Frank Howard and Leiden in there with Richardson and Coleman and Gbinije, which is a lineup we haven't seen a whole lot of, those 5.
So one thing I wanted to ask before we get off the senior day topic is, and we'll just forget about Trevor Cooney right now, where does Michael Gbinije, knowing that there's still some of his story to be written here as we get closer to the postseason, hopefully the NCAA tournament. We'll also talk about that coming up. But, where is Gbinije poised to be remembered or ranked, let's say ranked, in terms of all-time great Orange players? Or maybe you could pull some names from the past that he would be kind of equivalent to. Like, is it if he takes them to the Final Four, is it a John Wallace type of career, or is it more of a Dave Johnson type of career? Where do you put him?
I think the Dave Johnson comparison is a pretty good one. He's a 3-year guy, so take that into account.
Yeah.
He's only played in one NCAA tournament game, and it was a loss to Dayton.
Mm-hmm.
So take that into account for now. He's only played in one conference tournament game, and that was a first-round loss.
Yeah.
So that's where we really separate the really good Syracuse Orange players from the greats, the absolute greats. And until he can do that, I don't think we're going to see him in the greats, in the pantheon, really, if you will.
Yeah.
But, I think he's a top 40 guy, probably, if you just base it on performance and what he's contributed to the program.
Stats, yeah.
He's the bright spot on this team, and
no doubt.
And last year, he was. I think it's a weird thing because he number one, he wasn't a recruit. He came in as a transfer. We didn't know what to expect, really, other than, he came from Duke, so he must be pretty good, right? That's kind of the mindset. But
yeah, we stole one from Duke.
Came in as a swingman, as a 3 probably, and then they converted. Last year was a transition year kind of for him to transition into playing a little bit more point, although Caleb Joseph spent a lot of time at the point. And this year he was exclusively the point. So you didn't get a feel for what this guy maybe could be over the course of 4 years, because it was almost always an evolution for him.
Sure. Yeah, and if you were to take just like single season, this has got to be up there with one of the best single seasons, regular seasons maybe, that anybody's ever had in a Syracuse uniform. Maybe a top 10 type of deal.
But based on what's around him and what they've got available to them, and you don't really have a big guy presence to kind of take the pressure off the backcourt. And so, if I'm a coach against Syracuse, I throw the kitchen sink at Michael Gbinije and force Richardson and Cooney to beat me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of teams are doing that. And there's been a couple of games where Gbinije's had 10, 12, 14 points, and didn't play very well, but still he's the go-to guy. Whether because in a lot of cases there are no other options.
Yeah, and similar to last year's team where Raccoon Christmas had an all-time season for Syracuse, basically because we didn't have many other options. But unlike Christmas, Gbinije is going to have a chance to add some postseason, a postseason run potentially to his single season resume here. So, but Gbinije is really a great success story. He obviously was troubled when he came from Duke. It took him a while to get acclimated, and he's going to find himself with an opportunity to play in the NBA. So for
right.
that, I'd tip my cap to Michael Gbinije. He really has improved, and yesterday just carried the team on his back. So
as I think about it, one decent comparison might be Rick Jackson. Rick Jackson was a role player, solid player. Didn't get much run as a freshman. Played a bit more as he was sort of in Scoop's shadow when they came in together. And as a senior, he was the rock. I mean, he was the guy that led that team as a senior, and it gave him a real good opportunity to play professionally, and still does. And I think Gbinije is sort of on that path. I mean, two very different players, obviously, but that's the kind of career progression that we've seen from him. A guy that took the leap. We've always talked about guys that we kind of wait for, and hopefully Roberson, we waited a long time for him to make that same leap, but Gbinije definitely did.
Yeah.
This was not the guy we saw last year, and certainly not 2 years ago. He made a leap this year, which is exactly what this team needed to even be relevant, let alone great.
And neither one of these guys could bring 30,000 in for senior day. Traditionally, when we have great seniors, that will get the push above 30,000 in the dome. There's 27,000 and change there yesterday. A pretty good crowd, no doubt, for senior day. But I think that's also kind of indicative of how Cuse Nation looks at these current seniors. It's almost like they're hired hands and maybe not true Orange greats.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm surprised that it sort of speaks to the I don't know, love-hate might be a strong term, but of Trevor Cooney, he's possibly not as beloved as some of the guys that we, certainly Jerry McNamara, but he would drive, he would get, hundreds and hundreds from Scranton.
Yeah.
But everybody loves Jerry McNamara. It's disappointing that he couldn't get 30,000. I think if they had played a better team in senior day, you'd have seen 30,000. I think it was an unfortunate circumstance that, it's a
Carmelo senior day.
The NC State team that came in on senior day, and the best games that they had were either weeknight games or when students were gone, so there was no 30,000 potential, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just remember, and I said it was Carmelo's senior day. Actually, Carmelo never had a senior day, obviously, but I remember them closing out the season with Rutgers. It might have been the 2003 season, or it might have been, maybe it was Jerry McNamara's last game in his senior year, but I remember them packing in 32,000 for Rutgers. But so anyways, we're running a little bit behind here. It's just interesting when we get towards the end of the season, all these things like, considering what life's going to be like without guys like Gbinije and Cooney, and kind of trying to see, where their careers rank. But it obviously still is going to come down to what happens in the next month, is how we'll remember Gbinije. Because if he does exit early from the NCAA tournament, or, God forbid they lay an egg the next 3 weeks and don't even get into the tournament, he'll just be gone off into the other ether, But if he does get us, even to, an Elite Eight, all of a sudden, I think, he just rises up there, as we'll say, oh, remember that year Gbinije carried us to the Elite Eight. So we'll see. Time will tell. Now, something that's really concerning about this team is that Tyler Roberson, who seemed to be coming into his own, has now regressed to the point where Boeheim's going to play him for 14 minutes. 14 minutes for Tyler Roberson yesterday. What the heck? He's definitely in the doghouse, and it's not a great time of year for Boeheim to be having to deal with a issue like this, I guess, to the point where he's going to pull out a guy like Tyler Roberson for 14 minutes, and he's going to play Coleman 35 minutes, which we didn't even know if he physically could do that. So that's a good sign that Coleman can log 35 minutes, even though he only pulled down 7 rebounds in those 35 minutes. And Tyler Lydon 32 minutes. Of course, we're comfortable with that, but this team's not going to go to the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16 or the Final Four without Tyler Roberson contributing the way he did against Duke and some of the other teams, mid-season. What's going on with Roberson?
I don't know. Same thing that's gone on with it for 3 years, really.
Yeah.
It fits and starts, really. It's all it's ever really been with him. And part of me thinks that it's a confidence thing, that he sort of gets in the doghouse and maybe he takes it too personally and it gets him down. But part of it too might just be matchups, really. Duke has, at least when Syracuse played them, they didn't have much of any interior presence. They've got a Plumlee in there somewhere, but Roberson could really find his way against a team like that. But NC State, they're not a great team, but they've got size, and Anya and Abu, and those guys are good, solid guys, and they're rebounders. They're not really as much scorers; they're rebounders. And Roberson had a more difficult time in that game. And you go back to the Pitt game, and those guys are beasts on the glass. And Roberson has a difficult time against that. I think he's long and lean, and in a game where it's not against a really strong, beefy front line, he can probably find his way a little bit more than a game where they're bigger, stronger, more physical big men. I think that he struggles in that style.
To beat
part of that, but.
Yeah.
I don't think Boeheim does him any favors by just beating him down, especially publicly, and that seems to be his MO. I don't know if that's the right answer, but like he said in the press conference last week, we have no other options here. He's got to play. I don't think you want to play Tyler Lydon 40 minutes and sit Roberson like you're doing with Caleb Joseph. I don't think you got that luxury.
Yeah, and we're going to play some teams, obviously, with big front lines that we're going to have to get by in the tournament. And we're going to need 34 points from Michael Gbinije to beat him. We know we're going to need heroic performances out of our guards, Maybe one game Cooney gets hot and hits 6 or 7 threes, and maybe the next game Richardson does it and Gbinije carries us for the rest. But most teams that will play in the NCAA tournament will have stronger front lines than us. And most teams that will play in the ACC tournament probably. And it seems like it's a lot of those lower half of the ACC teams, too, that maybe give us bigger matchup fits than a Duke does or even a Virginia maybe.
Yeah, because they're teams that aren't blessed with the elite athletes.
Yeah.
And then so they end up having to go with a style that's a bit more, oriented around a slower pace and big men, and they don't move as well. And I don't think Syracuse plays very effectively against teams like that. Florida State, that was probably the best game this team played,
right.
Other than maybe the Duke game. And they're a faster paced team that wants to get out and run, and that was a good because Syracuse's zone slows that up, and teams don't know how to figure it out. But as far as rebounding goes, against a slower team like that, this team struggles, and that's where Roberson gets his his success is based on rebounding and getting putbacks and being able to slash. And against a slower paced team and one that's more oriented on defense, I don't think he's got that option anymore.
Sure. Well, we're going to rely on some freshmen heading into this postseason, and I personally think they're ready. I think Richardson is really can't be considered a freshman anymore, and I feel the same way against Lydon. While physically Lydon, I think, will hopefully get a lot stronger for next year. I think we can throw them in any situation, both those guys, and they're going to be productive. And what Lydon lacks in strength, he does pretty well in positioning and in timing, in terms of getting rebounds. And although he did only have 5 rebounds yesterday in 32 minutes, but on 5 of 11 shooting, and he was also cold from 3, which is odd, 1 for 7. He's usually, when he shoots at a pretty good clip. But and then Richardson yesterday, 37 minutes, 5 of 13 shooting, 13 points, 7 assists, though, 6 rebounds. I mean, I think these guys are ready. I don't look at them as freshmen anymore on this team that we need to be concerned about if they can handle themselves under the spotlight of CBS Sports and NCAA, March Madness. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, definitely. I was real pleased with Richardson. That wasn't his best game yesterday by any stretch, but just a solid game. I mean, 13 points, the 7 assists. I was very pleasantly surprised by that. And he was a guy. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that there would be a game where a relatively close ACC game where Malachi Richardson had 13 points and 7 assists, and 3 for 6 from 3, I would have called you a liar, because he struck me as just a 3-point chucker from the get-go, and he's really evolved his game over the course of the last 2 months to the point where he sort of takes a leadership role in a sense. I mean, everybody sort of takes a backseat to Gbinije in that, but he really has stepped up fairly or unfairly far, more than Trevor Cooney has. I mean, if you've got a freshman that's 13 points, 7 assists, 3 for 6 from 3, and you've got a fifth-year senior that's 5 points, 0 assists, 0 for 6 from 3. Mm-hmm. Again, if you had said that at the beginning of the season, who would have had those lines? There's no way you would have said Richardson and Cooney in the way they do. So he's a guy that we absolutely can count on, I think. And I think his decision making is significantly better than it was at the beginning of the season. He's adapted to the pace of college basketball, I think, better maybe than we thought he could. And I mean, he's a guy that I think this team needs production from him to be able to go far in postseason, and I don't have any reservations that he can do that. Tyler Lydon, same thing. I was a little bit surprised he took as many threes as he did. I think he was 1 for 7 from 3. It seemed like he was trying to force it a little bit.
Yeah,
he's taking some shots off the dribble and guys in his face, and he can get that shot off because he's so tall. He's 6'8", and usually he's got a smaller guy when he extends out beyond the line, so he can get the shot off. But it just seemed like he was relying on the 3 too much. I mean, he was 1 for 7 from 3, 5 for 11 from the field. So it's, he's 4 for 4 from 2. If he's getting inside, he can get to the rim, and he's 100% shooting inside the arc. I think he relied on the 3 a little bit too much, and so I'd like to see him get inside a bit more. But we all know he can shoot it, and so it's just a matter of, I think, him picking his spots and becoming more efficient behind the arc. But the rebounds, that comes and goes with him. I think in the same way with him with Roberson, they're just they struggle a little bit against a strong, good sized front line. But like you said, I love his timing. Mm-hmm. I love his intensity. He never takes a play off on defense or on the glass, and so I think he's a guy we're absolutely counting on. These guys, they're freshmen by name only. They will be go-to guys in the postseason, guys that this team really needs to count on.
No chance of these guys going pro, right?
It affords this team to have a bad game by Trevor Cooney and still be able to beat a loaded average team like NC State.
I mean, is there any chance right now that either of these guys bolt after the first year? I mean, neither one would be a lottery pick, but that hasn't stopped some guys in the past. I don't think so. I think they'll be back, but sometimes you get surprised there when the time to declare comes, and all of a sudden you hear, Malachi Richardson's entering his name in the draft. Hopefully not, right?
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, part of it that you and I and the average fan will never appreciate is what sort of demands they have on their life.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't afford to be in college anymore. I got a family to support. I got to make money. If it's not in the NBA, it's in Europe or in the D League or something. So that's a part we'll never really truly understand. But from a developmental perspective, neither are anywhere close to NBA ready right now. Yeah. I can't imagine anybody's convincing them otherwise. But it'd be great to see them up here for 2 more years. I think Richardson is in a tougher spot because that's the position he plays. That's just there's in the NBA, it's a dime a dozen at 6'5" swingman, 3-man that he would have to sort of find a role in the NBA at that size and skill level. He'd benefit from at least another year, if not 2.
Or 3.
Like to see him maybe make a leap in the second year. Fine, more power to you if you take that game to the pro level.
Sure.
Lydon just has to get stronger. He's got the body. I think he can support it. They were saying on the broadcast yesterday that he can. That a lot of guys sort of make that leap strength-wise from between freshman and sophomore year. They understand what it takes to be able to compete in 30-plus minutes against strong front lines and high-level college basketball. I expect that from Lydon. I'd like to think he recognizes that he's probably strength-wise not there, and he can use at least a year or two. So I think I'd be shocked if either guy made that choice. And it's a nice problem to have, because I think we've always been worried about that the last several years, and for good reason. We've had some guys go early that may or may not have been the right decision in hindsight.
So here we go. We've been doing this every week for the past 3-4 weeks, and we got to take a look at our NCAA resume check. Last week, we took a step back with 2 losses at Louisville and home against Pittsburgh, but there's one big win. Although it's NC State at home, it gets us to 19, and I think we both agreed that if we get to 20, one way or another, even if we lose our last 2 games and win at the ACC tournament, or win one of the next 2 and lose in the, if we can get to 20, we probably don't have to worry. And but boy, don't we better get there before the ACC tournament, because anything can happen at that point. If we could lose 3 straight and end the season with 19 wins, that would be 19-13, I believe. If we lose our next 3 games, that's squarely on the bubble and maybe on the worst side. And it's not going to be easy, because we go at North Carolina Monday night, and then it's going to, if let's just say we lose that game, which odds makers would agree. Now it's Florida State on the road, a team that we match up well against, but that game becomes gigantic, because if we lose to that, now all of a sudden we're not even in the top half of the seeding in the ACC tournament, and we're playing a team that probably finished ahead of us in the standings in the ACC tournament. So, man, that Florida State game could be gigantic. Ideally, we beat UNC at home, in the Dean Dome, and all questions are off. If we win that game, we're in like Flynn and probably jumping up a seed. But can you anticipate that scenario where we lose Monday night against North Carolina, then all of a sudden we go down to Duke or Florida State, and we lose that game? I mean, that is danger zone. So while I feel really good about getting to 19, getting to 20 might not be as easy as we hope.
Yeah, it's hard to feel good about going into Chapel Hill and winning that game, but yeah, I mean, that's still guys get hot from 3 and there's a chance, but yeah, that'll be a tough one to predict ahead of time. So I think it's to me it's less about the 20 wins in the overall as it is the 10 ACC wins. So right now they sit 9 and 7.
Yeah.
And the 10th ACC win will give you 20 overall, but I think that's where they'll discount some of the losses that Coach Boeheim wasn't here for. In the overall, and losing to Georgetown and losing to St. John's, where they discount those games a little bit. And it's, that's an awful St. John's team and a not very good Georgetown team that they lost to, and so you can discount those a little bit, hopefully off the resume once the committee meets. But the 10 ACC wins is really where it's going to be, and then it comes down to at Florida State. Now, fortunately, what happened with Florida State in the Dome is we saw that there was a great matchup for Syracuse, and I'd like to think the same thing will happen down there. Historically, Syracuse has had pretty good success with Florida State since they moved to the ACC, and fingers crossed that the same thing happens down there. Guys got to be making shots still, though. If they go cold from 3, this team lives or dies by it. Then we'll be nail biting as it gets into the ACC tournament and then the Selection Sunday. But the thing I'm worried about, this team, if they do lose to NC State and Florida State, and that puts them at 19 and 12 and 9 and 9 ACC, then you go into the ACC tournament game almost with a must-win in the first round.
Yeah.
And right now they are tied for 7th in the ACC with Clemson and Pitt only a half game back. And Syracuse doesn't hold the tiebreaker against Clemson or Pitt, so that could put them potentially at a 9 seed against either a Clemson or a Pitt.
Who both beat us.
First round. And
0 for 3 this year against those two.
Pittsburgh handled Syracuse legitimately twice.
Yeah.
And Clemson beat Syracuse pretty convincingly the time they played. So those are not first-round games that I'd want to see if I'm a Syracuse fan hoping for a one win to get them in the tournament.
Yeah, North Carolina not doing us any favors by losing to Virginia yesterday either. It's difficult to see them coming off a road loss and following that up with a home loss. So it could really be we could be in the danger zone when we head down to Florida State, and I'd like to think we could take care of that one. But with Roberson playing 14 minutes and Cooney going 0 for everything, man, you never know with this team. You never know. So, all right, well, let's move ahead now to our favorite part of the show. It's time for Connor's Corner Trivia. Brad, what do you have this week for us for some Cuse trivia?
I have a couple things. I'm kind of all over the place with trivia, but I got a couple things that we can work through today. So there was an instance during the NC State game, watching it from yesterday, that gave me a little bit of a shudder. It was a bad situation that a Syracuse team suffered from years ago that was reminiscent in the game yesterday. There was a guy on the NC State team that had the connection to a Syracuse game that we don't remember very fondly. And I wanted to see if you know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
A guy on the NC State team who has a connection to a Syracuse loss from many years ago. I realize that's pretty obscure.
It is. I'm trying to think of would giving me the guy on NC State that you're thinking of give it away?
It probably would, yeah. I mean, I will eventually if you don't know what I'm talking about and can't figure it out.
Yeah, I pretty much am lost right now. I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I'm running through a lot of negative, major bad losses over the careers. I'm thinking, I'm thinking Vermont. I'm thinking Indiana.
It wasn't a horrible loss, but it was one it's one of the great games in Syracuse history that didn't go our way.
Maybe the loss to Arkansas in Moton senior year.
No, you have to go further back than that, but.
Lost to Navy by the Pearls last game.
Oh, not a bad guess, but no.
I mean, those are some of the all-time worst losses.
Actually, very, very similar.
Richmond
scenario you just outlined.
Losing to Richmond?
No. So
man, these
you
are
mentioned Pearl's last game.
Yeah.
Think about Pearl's last Big East game.
Pearl's last Big East game was against St. John's. Pearl had the ball, went coast to coast in like 5-6 seconds, and was blocked by Walter Berry. And
that was the game. There's a guy in NC State right now that played yesterday. Played considerable minutes yesterday. One of their key guys is a freshman on that team who has a connection to that game.
A son of one of the former St. John's players, like Willie Glasser.
That's correct. Keep thinking.
Walter Berry, Mark Jackson, Chris.
Think about a guy who played a very key role in that game.
Oh, Ron Rowan or Matt Brust?
Ron Rowan.
Ron Rowan, okay.
Ron Rowan's son is Maverick Rowan. Played on NC State. Had 10 points yesterday.
Wow.
Hit 2 threes. Just like his father, hitting threes against Syracuse.
Yeah. Seems that's pretty
Actually,
interesting.
he didn't hit a three, but he made the 2-point basket with 8 seconds left.
Did the announcer say that? Did the announcer say this is the son of Ron Rowan who played for St. John's at any time? Because I missed that if they did.
No, I don't believe they did.
Okay.
And I picked up on it. I wonder if that's any connection to Ron Rowan. I mean, he's blonde-haired white guy that
red jersey,
good outside shooter. I just thought, hey, maybe there's a connection there, and I pulled it up, and sure enough, son of Ron Rowan, former St. John's player.
Well, nice work digging that one up.
Yeah, so I'm scarred by some of those games, and I have no ability whatsoever to let them go.
In that particular game, I just remember when Pearl was streaking down the court with time running out that I was 100% positive that he was going to score it and we were going to win. And then, to see him blocked at the rim by Walter Berry was just like such a surprise and so shocking. I actually had some, what were we, Brad? 13 years old, 12, 13 years old.
12,
yeah.
13, yeah.
Yeah, I spilled my snacks that I was having and I made a mess and just kind of fell to the floor in a slump.
As I was reading into it, and after I made the connection, and I was trying to remembering that game a little bit more, I just Googled Ron Rowan Big East tournament, and New York Times had a great article, and I think it came out right around the very end of the demise of the Big East as we all knew it, of the last Big East tournament, and they had a great history of that particular game, and I had interviewed Pearl and Walter Berry almost entirely, but Ron Rowan was quoted several times in that article, and it was fun to relive that game. And so you're talking about Pearl's drive, and Rowan made that shot with 8 seconds, and Syracuse had no timeouts, so they got it to Pearl, and it quoted several guys on the St. John's team, Berry being one, that said, no, actually it was Rowan rather, and said, "I've never seen anybody go faster with the basketball than Pearl Washington did after he got that inbounds pass. Like,
yeah.
He was a freight train going down the court."
And he wasn't, even back then, he wasn't like slender and thin. He was still a little chunky, but boy, that guy could move.
No, but what everybody said was Pearl was faster with the ball than without. And the principle of that's crazy in a sense. I mean, it was just where he focused his energy. But you always tell your players. I tell my sixth graders, guys are slower with the ball than without. You as a defender have the advantage. If he's got the ball, he's going slower than you are. Use it, but not Pearl. Boy, he got the ball in his hands and he was lightning. And then without the ball, he just sort of did Pearl things, and just it was sort of the guy that looked like the guy down the street kind of guy. So, but that was the thing of Walter Berry when he blocked that shot. Pearl's asked him several times since then, how did you know, how were you able to block that shot? And Berry every time said, because I knew exactly where you were going with it.
Yeah, right.
Pearl was not going to pull up with a jump shot. Pearl was going to go to the rim with that shot. Yeah. Barry had seen him enough times. They grew up together in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Barry knew exactly what Pearl was going to do, and Pearl did it. And, almost made it. I mean, that ball was close to going down, but Barry got it. Credit to him.
Well, yeah, that's going on over 30 years ago now.
31 years ago this weekend.
31.
Yep.
That's apropos. So, is that we going solo question this week?
30 years ago. It was 30 years ago. It was 86. You're absolutely right. That was a little prelude to the trivia, but I got a couple other small ones.
Okay.
Who on this team, on this current Syracuse team, has a double-double?
Okay.
Of course, their career.
Of their career. Well, we know Roberson does, right? And we know Gbinije does.
Gbinije does.
And I think Richardson does. Malachi Richardson, I think, had one. Maybe I'm wrong.
Richardson does not.
Okay. Cooney does not.
Does not.
Jeez, that's amazing. In all those games.
Cooney's never getting 10 assists in a game. Are you kidding?
Yeah, but I was thinking, rebounds. Maybe you get 10 rebounds every now and then.
Cooney's not rebounding. He's getting run out so he can spot up in the corner and jack up a three.
Leiden's got a double-double. Tyler Leiden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't Caleb Joseph have a big assist game? I'm going to say no on that. No.
Caleb Joseph does. He had one last year.
Okay, I thought he had one really good game.
I think that was that Villanova game that went overtime. He had 10 assists in that game. Okay. Maybe 10 and 10.
And Coleman, no.
Correct.
Wow. He played 35 minutes yesterday. You think yesterday he could have got one, but 7.7 rebounds, not quite enough.
Yeah.
And then who else on this team that might be potential? No, that's it. That's it.
That is it. Those four guys. Now, here's the crazy part is only two of those guys have gotten double-doubles this season.
Leiden? Or not Leiden. Leiden and Roberson.
Obviously Leiden.
Leiden and Roberson.
Yep. Gbinije doesn't have a double-double this season. A guy running point hasn't had 10 assists in a game. So, I mean, no one on this team has had 10 assists in a game this season. Let's just throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gbinije's not the classic point guard, so you sort of expect that. I mean, he had 6 assists yesterday. That's pretty good. I mean, that's probably at the high end of what he's capable of doing, I'd say. Or what he's inclined to do, anyway. I mean, he's more of a shooter than he is a distributor. This team needs.
When he's a big, who's he going to pass to that's going to score it too? It's like
exactly.
Richardson
maybe. I mean, yeah. He's not going to dump it down to anybody, posting up on the low block.
So it's difficult for him to get assists. Frank Howard next year, I think, will have a few double games with 10 plus assists.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think he can. He looks for a shot, but probably not to the same degree. And he's a guy that can get into the lane and drive and kick and find bigs on the opposite block. I think he's got a very good eye for the angles. I think he takes a few too many chances this year, but he's learning. He's a freshman. That's sort of expected. He does what you'd expect a freshman point guard to do, honestly, when he gets in the game.
Another little tidbit from this week in news is Coleman's coming back next year. So Roberson and Coleman back next year. They should both be double candidates next year. Every single game in out one of the two at least. But
well, and with Pascal Chukwe.
Yeah, he should help them out more too.
Right.
Yeah, but think about this. Now, I don't want to get too far, and we're running out of time here. But next year's front line: Roberson, Coleman, who, I just another year. Next year could be a breakout year for him. And then Pasquale Chikwu and too bad. Mustafa Dieng maybe coming. I don't know what his status he is.
He came out this week, or his coach did, and said he's still loyal to Syracuse.
Yeah.
He's opened up his recruiting a little bit, but I think Syracuse is still high on his list. It doesn't sound like he's going to leave this year. It may be another year yet, but he's putting up good numbers in Florida at the junior college he's at.
Could you see us going to a lineup next year that includes those three big men I just mentioned, Roberson, Coleman, and Chikwu, if I'm even saying his name right, and Leiden at the top of the zone?
Wow. And Leiden, I don't know if Leiden could play the two. I don't think offensive. You wouldn't see as much penetration. You would need a very active point guard, and Frank Howard can potentially be that guy. I don't know if if you do that, then you take Richardson out of the equation.
True, unless you let Richardson run the point, and now all of a sudden you got the biggest team in the history of college basketball out there, and Leiden, hanging out by the hash mark, hitting threes maybe. But yeah, that probably wouldn't be something you'd see a lot. But it's interesting to think that because it would be, I think it would be possible for Syracuse to do that. So
it would. I could see them going with a big, they get a 4 or 5 point lead in the last 30 seconds, and then you get those bigs in, then you lock down on the rebounding, and I think that's a real option that this team has that they certainly don't have now.
So okay, we got about 10 minutes in the show. We got a lot to squeeze in here. Got another trivia for us?
Yeah, I got one more.
Okay.
How many guys have scored more in a single game in ACC play, or by an ACC team, not even an ACC play this season, than Michael Gbinije had yesterday?
How many other players scored 35 points or more than you? Okay. I know that Johnson there for North Carolina did it.
Yep, good call. He's got the most, 39 points he had. A crazy 39 and 23 rebound game against Florida State. Holy cow. So that's what we need from one of our guys next Saturday.
It's Cooney. No, Cooney never hit. Cooney had 30-something. Didn't Cooney have 35 this year?
No.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if he's had more than 30. He definitely, the list that I'm looking at goes as low as 33, and he's not on it.
Yeah, I don't, I would assume there's a couple more, but the only one I can remember is Johnson.
There's one you saw yesterday.
I don't know if I saw it yesterday, did I?
Well, you saw the guy that had it.
Oh, for NC State?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. It was just the same game. So, Fat, what's the guy's name?
Cat Barber.
Yeah, Cat. I kind of call him Fat.
Fat Lever.
Yeah. Yeah, traditionally
Cat
NC...
Barber's the leading scorer in this league. That's one thing Syracuse did a really nice job yesterday, shutting him down. I mean, he was not a threat really at all. And that's the guy, as when you think about NC State, he's the guy. And, he ran a decent point, but, he was 3 for 8 from the field. He did most of his damage from the free throw line, 8 of 9. But, one of the top scorers in the ACC had only 15 points. That's the biggest reason Syracuse won this game. That zone gave him fits.
Yeah, and hopefully that's the reason that we're going to win a lot of games going forward here into March, is because of that zone defense tightens down.
Yep.
So, all right.
For the record, Trevor Cooney's top game this season was 27 against Carolina. First time around.
Must have been thinking.
Hopefully he's got another one of them in him against Carolina on Monday.
Yeah. I think I was flashing back to last year's game against Notre Dame where Cooney scored in the 30s, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That was his, I think, top game as a Syracuse player was that Notre Dame game.
All right, Brad, great trivia as usual. Let's kick it over now for 2 for the road. Home stretch is really a road stretch. 2 on the road at UNC, at FSU. As usual, we want our predictions. I have faith that we can play again, with a Boeheim team coach can play against anyone, anywhere, no matter what our roster is. I have faith that we can compete. So, but law of averages, I'm going to chalk that one up as a loss. but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. So that means at Florida State, and I think we win that game. I think we win that game kind of easily, and that would be 20. That would put us at 20-11 heading into the ACC tournament. So, what is our record going to be, Brad, next week heading into the ACC tournament?
It's going to be 20-11. I agree with you 100% on what you just said. I do think that this team has the ability to give Carolina fits. It's just a tough place to win, and I just don't see that this team has it really unless they go lights out from three. There's just a lot of athletes on that Carolina team, and from that perspective, I don't know if Syracuse matches up, but anybody can get hot, and in a tight game, I do like our senior leadership, at least most of it, and that they can pull out a close one, but you got to get there first, and I do think Carolina's got more horses. Florida State, like I said earlier, that's for whatever reason always been a good matchup for this team. Whether it's just Boeheim's got Leonard Hamilton's number, or it's just the personnel and the athletes. It's just they're the zone that gives Florida State fits. But I think that's a 10 to 15 point Syracuse win down there, and going into the ACC tournament is probably a 7 or 8 seed.
All right, let's last topic of the day, two for the road here, and I mentioned it right off the top that I don't have the almost Christmas morning like anticipation for March this year, and I didn't have it last year, obviously, because Syracuse wasn't even in the tournament. But you would think that now, after a year off, coming back, and the whole reason I know is because the Big East, not being in the Big East is a big part of it. I don't look forward to the ACC tournament, really hardly at all. It's almost like I want to get it out of the way so we can get to the big tournament, whereas I really just savored the Big East tournament. I'd miss work to watch the Big East tournament, I would go home early from work to watch Syracuse in the Big East tournament, and then I would also look forward to watching every single game I could from the Big East tournament. And I don't...
Absolutely. Even the playing games, I'd watch. All teams that we love to watch, either to root for or root against.
Yeah, and it would be the point where I was like, okay, the Big East looks like they might be getting 7 teams this year, but we need Seton Hall to win 2 in the Big East tournament. So now you're watching with a rooting interest maybe. And again, I don't care. I really don't care how many ACC teams make it. The ACC will be... not much has changed. We've gone to the ACC. The Big East still may place more teams in the tournament year after year than the ACC. And the Big East has more teams at the top of the rankings than the ACC does. I mean, it's really kind of amazing that the ACC keeps pulling from the Big East basketball-wise, and the Big East keeps adding and exceeding expectations.
Yeah, one of the best games of the season this year was the game here in Cincinnati this week. Xavier and Villanova, 2 top 5 teams. Yeah. You think of 2 top 5 teams playing, and in the city of Cincinnati, you would have always expected Cincinnati in the Big East. That never happened. When it took Xavier to get in there, and that's become a better league. It's sad to watch. I enjoy watching the Big East now, probably as much as if I've got a free hour and there's a game on and it's the ACC game or it's a Big East game. I'll probably watch the Big East game, and I'm not even sure I care who's playing.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I agree with you there 100%. And I think that's why it's – and, when we were saying we're going to go to the ACC or not, and all that business, a lot of people would say to me, well, you're going to play North Carolina, Duke, Syracuse. It's going to be incredible. And, yeah, that'll be great, but that's just 1 or 2 times a year.
Yeah, you also get to play Florida State and NC State. Wake Forest and Clemson.
And you don't get to play Providence and Seton Hall and Georgetown and UConn, and you don't get to all get together at Madison Square Garden. And the biggest thing is I don't get to root for my conference mates because I really don't care about them at all. So it's really now it's all about Syracuse for me, and that has trickled down.
There was such a conference pride of, hey, Big East, the ACC, Big East is always fighting against the ACC for that acclaim, and that's gone now, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, it's trickled down to the point now where because I just am focused on how Syracuse does, that I really am less inclined to watch other college basketball games.
It's funny you brought that up this week, because I was thinking that exact same thing. I was out to dinner last night, and there was a game on, and I would admit I didn't have much interest in it.
Yeah.
I don't even remember who was playing, and usually I would be able to sit down in my idle time and watch a game, and I don't do much of that anymore. And then, maybe it's just age and different demands on your time, but I've probably become less of a casual college basketball fan, and maybe it does have something to do with this conference situation.
I think it's hurt. I think it's carried over to the entire country for the most part, though. This conference realignment stuff has really hurt the casual fans' interest because, number one, it's harder to follow it all because you forget maybe who's where and why. And the casual college basketball fan could care less about Syracuse, Georgia Tech, too, where they would care a little bit about Syracuse, Seton Hall.
It hasn't created rivalries by any means. It's destroyed rivalries.
Right.
The Big East rivalries that existed are no more. Even some of the other conferences, we've seen those rivalries get taken away, and that's the hard part to stomach. West Virginia. Who does West Virginia have any rivalries with in the Big 12? Who does Cincinnati have any rivalries with in the AAC, the American?
Temple.
There are teams that are just sort of nomads. It seems like, and they'll always hang their hat on Duke and Carolina. Fine, ESPN will cram it down our throats as much as they can, but that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too upset here. I got a full Sunday ahead of me. So I don't want to talk about that too much more. And we are up against it, Brad, so thanks for spending the last hour with us. We'll come back next week, and it will be our ACC tournament preview, hopefully talking about at least one win. 2 wins would be great. And then following that, we're going to have our Selection Sunday special coming up here, and that's going to be great because we didn't even do it last year, right? Because Syracuse wasn't even in it. So maybe I'll get more excited for March as we move ahead, but looking forward to getting back with you next week and talking more Orange hoops, Brad.
Yeah, it'll be fun. March hits us next week, and that's the best time of the year, we all know.
So thanks, everybody, for joining us here on the Upstate Orange podcast. We'll be back again next Sunday, probably Sunday morning, with another edition of the Upstate Orange podcast. Check out the live webcast schedule on fingerlakes1.com as we get towards the end of next week for the start time. You can subscribe to our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or via RSS, and we're online at fingerlakes1.tv/upstateorange. So for the Professor Brad Connor, I'm Jim Sinacropi. Have a great week, beat UNC, and let's go Orange.